This is the flag of Luxembourg, but did you know that historically it has also been associated with this flag? Well, that's right, today we're going to look at the old flag of Luxembourg and where they both came from. So this is the flag of Luxembourg, not to be confused with another flag which I'll get onto later in the video. It's known in the local Luxembourgish language as the Letzeburger Fähndel, or in the German, which many of the population also speak, the Flagge Luxemburgs, or in French, the Drapeau du Luxembourg, but for the rest of the video I'll simply call it the flag of Luxembourg. Now these two flags both have a very old origin, even if one looks a little more modern than the other, and that is with the duchy, formerly the county of Luxembourg itself. Now to go back we need to trace some of its early origins. In the Middle Ages this was a county that arose at some point in the 10th century as a separate entity, but for the purposes of today's video we're going to go back to 1214 and Count Henry V of Luxembourg, as this is where we find the origin of both these flags. Now Count Henry's father was called Count Walaran III, however he was Count not of Luxembourg but of the northern province of Limburg. His coat of arms is described as being argent, a lion rapant que fourché gules, armed, longed and crowned, in a very interesting mix of English and French. So what we can surmise from this is that his coat of arms was a red lion with golden claws, a golden tongue and a crown on a white background. So he was Count of Limburg, and indeed his son was Henry V, who would become Count of Luxembourg through marriage. However, he rather confusingly had another son also called Henry from a different marriage, and it was this Henry IV, who would follow his father Walaran as the Count of Limburg, and that is why he would go on to use his father's coat of arms for Limburg of the red lion on the white background. However, that left Henry V, who would go on to become the Count of Luxembourg, with the need to have his own coat of arms, lest he be confused with his namesake and the Count of Limburg just to the north of Luxembourg. And that is why he came up with his own coat of arms, which we see here. The very same red lion with golden claws, golden tongue and crown, but this time on a background of white and blue stripes, rather than just on a plain white background. Now, this has clearly been inspired by his father's coat of arms, and indeed is in keeping with that which continued to be used by his brother and his descendants. However, where the stripes came from is a matter of some debate. The foremost heraldist in the Luxembourg is Jean-Claude Lauch, and his idea is that it came from the coat of arms of the Counts of Loon and the Counts of Grand Pré, both of whom counted among the ancestors of Henry V of Luxembourg. And as we can see, this is the coat of arms that was being used by them, so gold and red horizontal stripes. So possibly it's through the combination of horizontal stripes onto this background inspired by the Counts of Loon and Grand Pré that we then get the design that Henry V and his descendants would use as the Counts of Luxembourg, with a little change in the colours there. Now his descendants would go on to rule Luxembourg until 1443, at which point Luxembourg became part of the Burgundian holdings of the Low Countries, the Burgundians often being called the Burgundian Netherlands, being in control of a large swathe of territories which today form up the Benelux, part of France and parts of Germany as well. However, following the death of Emperor Charles V, who was simultaneously the ruler of the Burgundian Netherlands, the Kingdom of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor, things would begin to unravel in this lovely little Benelux collection that the Burgundians had assembled. This came largely because the new territory of the Netherlands would be given to his son, who was not the Holy Roman Emperor at all, but just the King of Spain, Philip II. And so the Dutch decided to go on a rampage. Nice. The Dutch are revolting, came the cry from the Spanish as they watched them eat another raw herring. But the Dutch would go on and rebel and create the Dutch Republic after many years of struggle against the Spanish. Luxembourg would remain in its status as a county, that is until 1795, when in the French Revolutionary Wars the French would annex Luxembourg to France. Although that situation would also change in 1813, when the first of the House of Orange would return from his exile in England to the Netherlands and become the first king of the United Netherlands. Now Luxembourg would form part of this new kingdom, however it would have a special status, noting that the King of the Netherlands would be its sovereign head, although it would be somewhat independently ruled, with Prussian forces occupying the Fort Luxembourg, so as not to create a too powerful entity of the Netherlands that the Prussian state could not deal with, particularly on the border with France. However, things would be complicated further in 1830, and this time it would be the fault of the Belgians, because the Belgians would rise in rebellion against the Dutch, creating their own separate Belgian state. However, they weren't content with just what they saw as what is today Belgium, but rather they also wanted to take Luxembourg as their own, claiming the entire county as a part of Belgium. The Dutch, of course, were not too pleased about this, nor were the Prussians, who wanted to retain their military forces in such an important fulcrum of Europe, being situated between Germany, between the Netherlands and Belgium, and between France. And so in 1839 a compromise was struck in which a large part of the territory of Luxembourg would be given to the Belgians, and in return Luxembourg would become a semi-independent state, with Prussian troops still occupying the area of the Luxembourg fort. It therefore became important for Luxembourg, which is now an independent state, to have its own flag. And indeed, this is the flag it came up with, a tricolour of red, white and light blue, which of course was nothing like the flag of the Netherlands, just to the north. Perhaps this can be explained because of the same reason as in 1830, that the Belgians decided to choose their national colours also based on a coat of arms: red, yellow and black. There are a few explanations for where these colours come from, but the biggest explanation that has the most backing is that they go back to the Duchy of Brabant, which was a political entity that throughout much of the Middle Ages was incredibly important. Situated in today's southern Netherlands and large parts of today's Belgium, they were a powerful political entity for much of that period, and so were seen as a kind of founding father state of the modern state of Belgium when Belgians started clamoring for independence themselves. As we can see, the coat of arms of the Duchy of Brabant has a lion on it. The lion itself is yellow, its claws and its tongue are red, and it's on a black backdrop. So right there on this one coat of arms, we already have all the colours of the Belgian flags. However, there's another explanation that this Duchy of Brabant is only the lion that gives the yellow colour to the Belgian flag, whereas the red colour is given by three other coats of arms of Luxembourg, of Limburg and of Hainaut, and the black is then given also by Hainaut, which has two colours of lion on its flag, as well as the county of Flanders, which has a black lion, and the county of Namur, which has a lion which was cancelled for making insensitive jokes. However, when these three colours first came onto a tricolour flag together, they didn't quite do that in the way that you might expect. What I'll show you next may shock you. And yes, it's that, no, not in that way. But this was actually the first time that these three colours were used on a flag to represent a nation in what is today Belgium. And this occurred in 1789 as part of the Brabantian Revolution, because it occurred in an area that was still known as Brabant, even though it was at that time ruled over by the Austrian Empire, and so officially it was called the Austrian Netherlands. Now the rebels in this period needed something to identify with, a colour or a flag that they could use for their own, and so they chose cockades to fix onto their own hats of red, yellow and black as the colours of Brabant, this duchy that had been situated in the area. Now this uprising failed. However, just over 40 years afterwards, in 1830, when the Belgians rose up against Dutch rule, they looked back to this former revolution that had been fought, many of them by their father's generation, against the Austrians, and they decided to adopt the same coloured cockades of the black, yellow and red, which had come to symbolise rebellion against larger powers in the region. And so this is what we see in the Belgian Revolution of 1830. So, as I explained in my video on the Belgian flag and what happened to the old Belgian flag, it may well be possible that Luxembourg's choice of flag was very much influenced by neighbouring events. Of course, Belgium had gone back and looked at the county of Brabant and looking at the colours that were seen on the coat of arms of various of the old duchies and counties that would go on to make the state of Belgium for its three national colours, placing them first in a horizontal tricolour and then, probably because of revolutionary and French support, flipping them around to match the stance that they are found in on the French tricolour instead. So why didn't Luxembourg go for this? Well, it may of course be arbitrary that they decided to go for a horizontal tricolour based on the colours found in the coat of arms of Henry V of Luxembourg and his descendants, which of course had been the time that Luxembourg had been most independent and not part of a broader state, a situation which it found itself in again now in the 19th century. However, it may also be because of the fact that Belgium had come and taken a large part of the older territory of Luxembourg, and so that by having a horizontal tricolour, they were also imitating in a way the Dutch and their flag with the red, white and blue tricolour. Although ultimately for us now we wonder why they would have such a similar flag with what is a neighbouring country, making it often very hard to distinguish between the two. Well, in 1845 this would become the official flag of Luxembourg, although it wouldn't be until 1993 that they actually specified the exact colour of blue, which of course had led to a lot of confusion with the Dutch flag, because the only real difference between the two, one is the aspect ratio, with the Luxembourgish flag being much wider, let's say, than the Dutch flag, whilst the colour of blue of the Luxembourg flag is stated to be a much lighter shade of blue to the darker shade of blue found on the Netherlands flag. However, this can get more confusing because the older Dutch flags, particularly those of the Dutch Republican period, often had a lighter shade of blue as well, so things can get rather confusing between these two flags. So what then about the other flag of Luxembourg with the red lion on it? Well, this obviously is simply the coat of arms but then made into a flag format, and ultimately would be a rather good solution to the confusion between the Dutch and Luxembourgish flags if they simply opted to go for this design instead. However, in the 19th century, tricolours were all the rage, and so it was the fact that they decided to go for a tricolour instead of a more interesting heraldic themed flag. It's also a lot harder to draw. This is actually called the Rode Leeuw in the Luxembourgish language, which I have no idea how to pronounce, so I'm sorry if I have mispronounced this, but as you can probably guess, it means the red lion. Now, this was actually a very popular symbol that was being used in Luxembourg, and in 1972, after some pressure, it was agreed that this was allowed to be a civil ensign for use inside the country of Luxembourg itself, therefore a flag that could be used by non-government entities to represent the country of Luxembourg, and is often seen in a semi-official capacity at various places in the country, and I personally rather like this flag. But anyway, that is the story of the flags of Luxembourg and where they come from, with a little bit about the neighbouring state of Belgium as well. If you'd like to see the full video about the Belgian flag, check out the links in the description below, where you can also find flag videos of various other countries, including the Netherlands and some Frisian flags and others from the area, as well as the French flag, which I've covered in previous videos. So I hope you've enjoyed this video about the flags of Luxembourg and their origin. If you would like, I could do a separate video on the debate surrounding changing the Luxembourgish flag because of its similarities to the Netherlands, and with some saying they want a completely different design to stop them being confused, in a rather similar way to what we've seen in New Zealand, where there was recently a campaign to change New Zealand's flag because it was often being confused with the Australian flag. Anyway, for now, I have been Hilbert, and this has been The History.